See, Brian, that's what I got to do right there.
You took Brian on that.
Brian's already laughing, and I just got started.
It fit right in, too.
This is going to be wild today.
Oh, yeah. All right, so look, y'all already know we got some special guests in the house today. We got Brian Wilson and Brandon Lacey, but Brian and Brandon, don't let me mess up the church names, all right? So go ahead and tell us. Brian, we'll start with you, and then we'll go to Brandon. What church you at? What's going on with that?
I'm at Galilee Baptist Church in Shreveport, Louisiana. Right now, since the pandemic, just some of the things we're trying to do is we offer free COVID-19 testing every Thursday. We've kind of partnered with the Beard Foundation and 100 Black Men, and so they are pretty much funding the effort. However, we're kind of allowing them to gather on the campus. It's a pretty large campus, and use some of the facilities. And I just got a text. I think it was like 200 people, literally like going down Pier Avenue.
Right now?
Right now as we speak, trying to get tested. So I think it shows you just the need in our community for many people wanting to get tested.
Man, thanks for opening up the church to do that. That's awesome. Though,
so
man.
that's every Thursday.
What's the address?
9 to 3, 1500 Pier Avenue, Shreveport, Louisiana.
Isn't that if you're going down 20 and the 49 exit and then it's the next exit? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I put in your sound system.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, we'll be talking after this.
Hey, because
I sure did.
Brian, it ain't doing good, is what you said.
I was about to say, no.
Hold on.
Hey, it's not him, it's the operator.
Yeah.
So we go
let me
we can help you
Let me
with
just
that.
say I helped put in the sound system. I didn't actually put it in.
Yeah, but we'll be talking after this.
We'll try to get that straight.
Yes, sir, please.
All right, Brandon, where are you at, my man?
All right. New Life Full Gospel House of Worship here in Shreveport. It's in the Cedar Grove area of Shreveport. A lot of history, especially in regards to civil rights over there in Cedar Grove, and 7937 Line Avenue.
That's it.
Is the address. If anybody listening and watching is from the Shreveport area and you know what A.B. Palmer Park is, very small building right across the street from A.B. Palmer Park.
There you go.
Yeah.
This is what I'm talking about. Saying for you guys that don't know, that's right. There, you're on YouTube as well.
Right.
See,
Awesome.
so yeah,
Awesome.
so we do both. So you'll be able to hear it on podcast, and then if your people want to be able to watch on YouTube, they can do that as well.
Good deal.
So this is why I want the people to know I am excited that you guys have decided to come and hang out with us and talk, because we have been doing some Zoom calls with Laura Alderman. Laura hooked me and you up, Brandon, as far as our first meetings or whatever. And then Brian, it was so cool to just get to hear y'all's heart. And I said, man, would y'all be willing to do a podcast? And both of you said, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Sir.
So this is what we're doing. We've been talking now for a couple of weeks, obviously with everything going on. But we wanted to set up a time for our people, the listeners that are kind of tuning into the Backstage of Simple Church, to get a different take, because everybody's got questions. Everybody's trying to figure it out, and we're trying to figure it out.
Right.
You know, so I don't know if you guys want to talk about, have you enjoyed what Laura's been doing as far as putting us all on the same Zoom call to kind of walk through that? Just talk through that.
Well, absolutely. First, let me just recognize and shout out Laura, who's just been a wonderful friend, not even just in this effort. I've known her for quite some time, and we've worked together on a couple of projects, of course, in the educational realm. Yeah. And, I mean, I think that what she and others have done, but primarily her being the catalyst behind creating these conversations, is doing just that, creating a conversation and giving an opportunity for perspectives to be heard without judgment and penalty. And I think that goes a long way in bringing us to a place where we can really deal with this racism and social injustice issue. So I think it's been a marvelous thing that we've done.
Yeah. Brian, what you feel?
Totally agree with Brandon. It's been a blessing. This is my first time meeting Laura.
Okay.
And so just getting a connection, bringing us together, bringing me and Brandon back together.
Right.
I mean,
y'all went to school together, is what you said.
We went to school together. We also kind of started in ministry around the same time. When I was in seminary, Brandon came and spoke at the church back home when I had like a little youth revival or something like that.
That's
and at that particular time, he was at a son of the house.
Correct.
And so really just to see his growth. But in that time, we've kind of grown apart from one another, not on purpose, but just through ministry. So to bring me and Brandon back together was big, I feel like. And then just to introduce me, I think I was probably one of the pastors that probably didn't have the diverse circle of friends in ministry. And so this has kind of opened up that world for me.
That's awesome.
And I appreciate Laura for allowing me to meet people like you.
Oh yeah, hey, listen, man, it's my privilege.
Absolutely.
So let's
it's been
go
a
into
blessing.
that. Let's get, because a lot of people don't know y'all's story. So we'll start with whichever. It don't matter. Whoever wants to go first. Just kind of your backstory. You know, where you went to school locally. You know, kind of things going on. Then how you got in the ministry, because y'all went to college together. You said
Right.
That's
Now,
right.
What
We're
college?
rivals in high school. So
It's interesting because when we were in high school at that time, we both attended rival high school, which is probably at that time
Hated
one
each
of the
other.
one of the
You did?
biggest.
Yeah, that's keeping it real, Brian.
Yeah.
So now he's saying,
Yeah,
Now, what high school is this?
I went to Fair Park.
and I was at Huntington.
Ooh,
No, so
that's a Raider and the Indian right there.
You
son.
talk to, especially in the African American culture, who are familiar with those two schools. Back in the '90s, that's where the heat was. Like that's what
It was bad,
That
man.
was one
bad.
of the biggest games.
Yeah, it was
in the
bad,
city
man.
at that time. When
It was
Huntington and
bad.
Fair Park played, you knew that you was getting ready
Now
to
is
get a
this
show.
basketball and football?
Well, we were in the band together.
We were in the band.
In the band,
but
marching
it
band.
didn't. It was everything.
So it was rivalry. It
It
didn't
was
matter.
everything. If it was basketball, you had to be at the game an hour before, an hour and a half, if you wanted to get in, because they were shutting the game down by the time the boys'
yeah.
game started. If you were at the football, now the football teams were terrible, but
But
we
it's
had
the
the
rivalry.
best bands
Oh yeah.
in the city and really down Louisiana. And so it was a big rival. I stayed in Fair Park neighborhood. I went to school at Huntington. It was so bad. I was the drum major at Huntington my senior year.
Wow.
And so, but I stayed around nothing but Fair Park people.
Yeah.
My friends were Fair Park people. This is honest to God truth. I would come home from band practice and the Fair Park band members would be standing at the stop sign with their instruments, blowing music while I'm coming home in my car.
No, they did not.
Like, I dare you to get out your car and play your horn against us. I promise. This was like every day.
And understand, this is in the '90s. There is no social media.
Oh, yeah, you didn't have
We're
any
not
of
on.
that.
We're not on computers like a lot of the kids are now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So all we had was whatever extracurricular activity we
That's
were a part
awesome,
of. So if you were in the band, that was life. That was
yeah.
life all day, every day.
Now, what'd y'all play? Speaking of that, though, so hold on, because y'all both band. He's the mate. You're the drum major, but what'd you play?
And Brandon, I think he was in line to be drum major. I kind of remember the rumors back then of Brandon being, I don't know what happened, but I think he was in line to be the drum major at Fair Park. So
Yeah,
I don't want him to sell himself short. I'm being honest.
Yeah, I didn't want to come off my instrument. I played drums.
Okay.
I was in the percussion section, and it was a code that we have in the drum section that when you in the drum section
You don't
you
leave.
in. And so the opportunity for me to be drum major was there, but I didn't want to come out of the drum section, so I passed it up.
Now, what'd you play for? You were the drum major.
Alto sax.
Ooh, can you still play it?
I can.
Well,
Yeah.
we might need you. Because we
Nah.
pulled. Oh yeah, yeah. No, don't be saying no, bro. Dude, we trying to come together. If we get
We
that,
are, but not with the saxophone. We got to find out.
I like how honest he said. No, I ain't
that
doing it,
ain't
bro.
gonna happen,
What
no.
about them drums, B? If I need you on them drums, Brandon.
You're gonna have to call my son. I let my son take that
Okay.
over. My
Yeah,
son,
that's what's up, man.
he's training and he's learning. He's 9 years old right now, and he can keep your beat, and
That's
he can,
awesome.
He's learning how to get in the pocket and all that stuff. So I'll pass that on to him.
That's
Let y'all
good.
get it.
All right, so let's get back to, because we got your high school. Then where'd y'all go to college?
The world fame, Grambling State University.
That's what I'm
marching
talking
band.
about. Both of you.
Yeah,
Y'all graduate
man.
around the same time or no?
Well, I didn't stay long enough to
Yeah.
graduate.
Okay.
I graduated in 2004.
Wow.
But we were in the band together.
Yeah.
Y'all went from rivals to in the same Grambling, man. You were on the same team, them.
Yeah. And there was some fun days, man.
Oh, I bet so, man.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's crazy. What was y'all's major in school?
Computer information systems for me.
Yeah, mine was supposed to be accounting, but I went to school and did absolutely nothing but band.
There ain't no hating, Brandon.
Look, I don't hide it.
No, you got to
it's
keep
a part
it real.
Of, it's
You
a part
gotta
of who
keep
I am.
You
and-
got to keep it real. There's a lot more people that can understand where you're coming from than where
Absolutely.
Brian is. 'Cause I
Man,
promise you.
I agree.
You know?
it took
I
me
agree.
it took me 4 times to go to school to finally stay and get my degree. I finally did it. But when I first went to Grambling in 2000, all I did was band.
Yeah, we got people on our staff that failed out of LSU. I ain't saying no names.
Yeah, I mean,
Don't look at Scott.
Wasn't me.
We got a kid on our video team. He's a great guy. His name's Adam Water. He didn't fail out, but he went and was on the national championship run. He was the videographer for the national championship and just came home to work for us. But he's a great kid. But same thing. It's hard to go to school and be young and enjoy it, have all the fun, and then try to get your grades. So he's coming back to kind of figure that out and then go on. But
you know, if you go down there and you don't have that sense of purpose and actually have an understanding of why you're there, it can be difficult. And that's a biblical discussion. We talk about purpose all the time and how it plays a part in success. And I just wasn't ready.
Yeah,
you know, I wasn't ready. And you know, there were some things going back on at home with my mom. My mom, of course, single mother.
Yeah.
And left 2 sisters at home, and so things were going on at home too that kind of distracted me. So I ended up staying home.
It ain't much different though. See, I got a graduating senior. My daughter just graduated. So she's trying to figure it out too. Yeah. So just so you know, it's both. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Because you just don't know. So she's thinking she may go to Bossier or stay close, especially with COVID and all the crazy stuff. Like I spent all that money to go off and not even be able to go to class, maybe or whatever.
Yeah.
But so I feel you on that. So what was your family life, your home life like, Brian?
Man, I was raised by a single mother. She was physically handicapped.
Wow.
So I have never seen my mother walk before when she was living.
Yeah.
And so I was pretty much raised that way, me and my brother. My father was, they divorced when I was maybe like 4 years old. He was a educator as well. He basketball coach and all that, high school and stuff. And but whatever took place with them, we spent a lot more time with mama than we did with daddy in that whole process, for whatever reason.
Yeah.
So pretty much it was me, my brother, and my mom. And she did what she had to do. She was an educator, but she was forced to retire out of the school system because of her physical disability.
Yeah.
And so she was forced to retire early. So pretty much, I think maybe after about 15 years in the system, she had to retire.
Wow.
And so she just pretty much just full-time concentrated on me and my brother, raising us with whatever she had. And she did that. She was a musician in the church, though. So a lot of my exposure came from her being a musician in the church. She's played in the church all my life. Yeah. And so that's how we were raised, and she was big on education.
Yeah.
Making sure that we got out of the situation that we were in.
That's cool.
She was big on God, as of course, and
as a pastor now you.
Right. And so, man, that's pretty much how we were brought up. You know, a single parent, and we just did the best we could.
Did she get to see you be a pastor?
She did.
She
did. She passed away probably about 6 years ago.
Yeah, my mom too, right around the same time.
Yeah. So she passed away, and
she was tripping on me being a pastor, though. My mom was.
Yeah. So my mom.
She's like, I don't.
Check this out.
Okay, I don't know.
My mom cried when I told her I felt the call to preach.
That's awesome.
She cried, and she wasn't crying tears of joy. No, I'm serious.
She said, "Oh,
she was
Lord."
crying tears of sorrow. And I understand now.
Yeah,
to this day, I reflect back on it and I say, man, it's almost like she saw what was coming. I didn't understand it at that time. I've been preaching 20 years now.
Wow.
So I didn't understand it 20 years ago. But I understand it now, like the sorrow that comes with being a pastor, man, the burden that comes with it.
Oh, yeah.
And I see it now because my sons, they try to be like me. I don't know if that's what they want, they're going to do. Ultimately, I don't know if that's what God's purpose is, but right now it's about impersonating their daddy.
Oh, yeah.
So right now, whatever they see me do, so they just walk around the house with little books like they Bibles and they preaching all the time, right? And I don't even encourage it. I don't discourage it either.
Right.
But I look at it and I feel sorrow because I'm saying in my mind, man, if God uses them to do ministry, like I know the challenges that come with it.
Wow.
You know, they see the pulpit. They see me preaching, and they see people waving at me, saying amen, go pastor, hugging me after church. But what they don't see is what takes place after church.
Yeah, no, it's true, man.
No, that's like the gutter of ministry, man. Where, I mean, it's a lot of stuff down there in that gutter.
Yep.
You know, that's not presented on Sunday mornings. And oftentimes, man, the pastor takes that he's human, or
Right.
she's human.
That's right.
And so we take that with us, man.
Yeah.
And even though we understand forgiveness, we pray. It sits with us.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, when the stuff people say to you,
Yep.
you know, that triggers insecurities within
sure.
you.
Yeah.
They don't even
Absolutely.
think about the impact of their words on you. They just dumping it all on you, and
Yeah.
you're just like, man. And so I see my sons, and I understand now what Mom was talking about that burden of preaching. It's real.
Yeah.
You know, it's real. And
Yeah.
so
Hey, you know what's good about it though? Right now, man, we get to kind of unload that and
that's
help
why
each other.
Yeah.
and that's where Laura helps.
Yep. We know.
Connecting me.
Oh yeah,
reconnecting
because
me with Brandon.
you don't have to feel like you're doing it alone. Because I think
Absolutely.
we can all relate to that. So real fast though, and then we'll move to Brandon. But you mentioned your kids. What do you say? You have two?
I got 2 boys, and I just had a girl about 2 months ago. Me and my wife.
Congratulations,
Yep,
man.
yep.
3. That's what I got. 3 too. So I feel you on that. What are they? You said 2 boys and a girl.
Yeah, 4.
So I got
1,
2 girls and a boy.
2 months old.
4. Oh, no wonder you so tired, son.
Man, tired. Man.
That you even made this podcast. You need to get some mad
Man, let me
respect
tell
right
you
there.
something. I thought twice. But I showed up anyway.
Hey, man.
I gave you my word.
I'm gonna give you free lunch, baby. I'm gonna feed you.
Thank you, man.
We're
Because
gonna try to take care of
it.
you.
I was like, man, these kids, man, I can't do it. I'm gonna do it.
Hey,
I'm gonna do
dude,
it.
B,
Yeah.
I thank you.
Yeah,
All right.
man.
All right, so Brandon, give me a little bit on your family and your
That's
background
some,
and now.
That's some similarities there. I was raised by a single mother as well. I grew up pretty much every bad community. And when I say bad, I'm using that term not from my perspective on it, but just from the dynamics in the neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Pretty much every, impoverished neighborhood in the city. We bounced around a lot because of my mother's situation. My mother's one of the strongest people I've ever met in my life. For the majority of my childhood, she battled drug addiction. Because, of course, in the 80s, that's when, crack really hit
Oh, yeah.
our neighborhoods. And she battled that pretty much all the way up until high school. As a testimony in itself, she was able to break free of that. God just delivered her from that.
That's
And
cool.
she made up in her mind she wanted to do better for us. And I mean, just every time I see her, her strength just encourages me.
Yeah.
From some of the stuff that she survived. She's right now in the midst of a battle with stage 4 cancer.
I heard
she has
that
a very,
yesterday.
very rare form of cancer. But if you look at it, you never know it.
She's a battle, man. She's a fighter.
She always has a smile on the face, and I think that's where I get a lot of my strength and perseverance from. I grew up only boy, middle child, 3 of us, 2 sisters. My family, I mean, that just the epitome of strength, man. We've overcome so much, and so shouts out to all of my aunts, my cousins, that have just always been the backbone and have always supported me even in ministry. They kind of responded to my call a little bit different. They were all kind of excited, especially my great aunt, who probably is the reason why I have a God consciousness, because between her and my grandfather, they stayed on us about church, she taught me how to pray. My great aunt taught me the model prayer and made sure I was in Sunday school and things of that nature. And that's a testimony in itself because, of course, as I got older and became a teenager, I strayed away from a lot of that. But as Proverbs tells us, if you train up a child in the way that they should go, when they get old, they won't depart from it. And so as I got older and began to have my own experiences, even when you're going back to the college thing that we talked about, and began to have those life experiences, I began to draw on all those things that my great aunt, my grandfather instilled in me to develop a relationship with God on my own. I've been in ministry going on 15 years.
He started when he was 18, sounded like Brian around
19,
there.
yeah.
19, yeah.
Yeah, he was, because I remember even going back to our Grambling days. I mean, he was a wealth of knowledge when it came down to spiritual things. I was not. On the other hand, I was trending in the other
Brian,
direction.
You ain't hating. You just stay.
And even as he said, I'm glad we've got a chance to reconnect. Because even back then, man, I admired his ability to, in the midst of what was going on at Grambling, to still be a light and a witness for
Dude, that's
Jesus.
awesome.
And so I just, want to shout him out on that, and leaving Grambling, coming back home, and just beginning to develop a relationship with God myself. I've been married as long as I've been preaching. My wife came to my first sermon, even when she wasn't my wife. We had just started dating. The suit that I preached my first sermon in, my wife bought it. So I said to myself, well, if she believed in me that much, I may as well keep her, because she obviously sees something in me that I don't.
That's awesome.
So shout out to my wife, who's been a supporter of me, since day one. And so I've been preaching as long as I've been married 15 years. We celebrated our 15th anniversary back in April. 3 kids as well, so we all have that in common. Yeah. I have a 14-year-old daughter who's the oldest, a 12-year-old son, and a 9-year-old son. If we were
Brian, hold on a second. So all yours is babies. Ours is grown. Ours is getting on the grown side.
Me and my wife came out the gate swinging.
Yeah. We did too.
So I got married late and got babies late.
Hey, that's all right. See, see what happens is, reason we're trying to keep it real, is the older you get, the harder it is. See, so we got to encourage you. We got to lift you up, man.
Lift me up, man. Lift me up.
We got married in April of 2005. She was pregnant by the end of May.
That's what I'm talking about.
So we wasted no time, not on purpose. It was. I mean, if you
that's on purpose, bro.
If you ever see my wife, you will know why and how that happened.
I like Brian.
Not on purpose.
Brian said, "No,
you gotta have a child with a baby with your wife on."
He said, "Oops. No, dude, it's on purpose."
You don't have oops moments with your wife.
Now that was a oop moment. That was a. Let me tell y'all the story. We actually, my wife. I was working at that time. It was LSU Hospital. I was working in the emergency room. And tell you how we found out.
There too,
hold on. Yeah. What year was that?
This was 2005. This was 2005.
You wasn't there then.
No, I was there. Yeah, I worked on LSU 10 site from 2005 to 2009.
Oh, yeah.
It was
2005.
All right, go ahead. So anyway, we're just trying to make a connection.
And this is how we found out that we were pregnant with my daughter. My wife actually injured her knee. And so we brought her, because I was working in the emergency room, so we brought her to the emergency room to get her knee looked at. Now, whenever a woman comes to the emergency room, they automatically
they got to make sure
a pregnancy test.
Yeah, because they got to make sure. Now,
I worked at that time. Whenever they gave orders for whatever the tests are, I was the one who keyed the orders in. I worked at the desk, so I'm the one that keyed my wife's pregnancy test in, and was the first person to see that it was positive.
Crazy.
Man, wow. you got excuse my language, you got a hell of a story.
You keep it real. No, that's exactly right.
And so that's how we found out that my daughter was on the way, man.
That's crazy, man.
Man, that's wild.
That's cool, though. All right, so anyway, so we got in. All right, so that gives you your background. So have y'all been at the same church? Because obviously, you were growing up. So are these your home churches, or are these where you're pastor? Neither one of that's where your home church is.
No, that is not my home church.
You started one you're in.
Well, I pastored a traditional Baptist church for 2 years, and you going to
end it right there, ain't you? You're just not gonna say nothing.
You ain't got to go no further.
You ain't got to go no.
And no disrespect to the traditional Baptists, but everybody has their calling. That wasn't mine.
I understand.
Right.
And so I moved on, and the Lord graced me to start the church
that's cool.
that I'm at right now.
Yeah, Simple Church. Yeah. I got to start too, so I get it. And I was at 16 years in a Baptist church, so ain't no hating. We just stating.
Yeah.
Right.
Traditional Baptist, man.
Woo.
Thank you.
Well, the reason I say that, now the reason I'm saying this is this don't matter if it's black culture or white culture. The problem is, and I think we all can agree with this, because we could go down a whole nother just church talk stuff. Right. I mean, we're going to try to get into some race stuff, obviously, but I want the people to know who you are so they can connect and know your background stuff. But the problem is, I think it's just like anything else. It just becomes religion. So they're so committed to a denomination or a way that they don't open themselves up or allow themselves to see possibly what God's calling them to do a different way. It don't make them bad people. It don't make it a bad thing. It's just like, man, they get in a mindset. And once they kind of get in a mindset, it's hard to break that mindset. Absolutely. It's hard to do anything different. So, man, I just feel you. So that's what I'm saying is that there ain't no hating. It's just a matter of stating on. That's what makes it a challenge.
Right.
So
And it's not for everybody. Like you said, it's not the people.
Yeah.
We had great people there, but I mean, you put it the best way possible. When you become so, and this goes into any discussion that we can have, even outside of church. Once you become so committed to an entity, it becomes difficult to see different perspectives and see different opportunities.
That's right.
And it makes it different to really function according to what you know you can.
Yeah.
And, so it's not for everybody. There's nothing wrong with it. But as with anything else, everything is not for everybody.
Right.
And that just wasn't for me. There's the guy who's there now that's at the same church that I was at, it wouldn't work. He's doing a great job.
Yeah, that's right.
So
y'all are both young though to be pastoring too, though.
Yeah.
I mean,
I started I was 25.
You say you were 19, so man, that's young.
Well, I started preaching in 19, started pastoring maybe about 25, 26.
Yeah. Wow, man.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get into some of the stuff. Let's get into kind of what we've been talking about, because now y'all know them, man. These are some good dudes, man. I can't tell you again how thankful we are for you to come hang out with us and help us with our perspective, because what we're learning, and again, I think everybody's really trying to open their mind up to go, all right, what can I do to be better? And how can I, and one of the things I think I'm learning and want to be better at is providing a platform to be able to discuss these things in a public platform, as opposed to, I got good friends and we can hang out and talk, but people don't always hear that, or they don't know what we're thinking about or whatever. So that you're here is huge. So is there anything you want to get off your chest before we get even into some of the questions that people have had? Because I asked some people to submit some questions, so I think it'll help us. But let's start first. It doesn't matter, Brandon or Brian, whoever wants to go. Like, man, I think we ought to start with this or that. If you have something in your mind you want to cover first.
Nah, I'm interested to see what the questions are.
Yeah.
Kind of hoping that'll kind of facilitate the thoughts.
That's cool.
Yeah. It's the same thing. I love to just really be direct in answering the questions that the people have. I mean, because there's so much that could be said.
Yeah.
In the onset of the situation, that I think we do better just starting with the questions.
All right, so here's a common question I hear in the white community, which I think, again, don't take it wrong, just a common question, so then you work through. What do you, as, again, pastors in the community, hope to see, want to see, that would make you feel as though it's making some progress, moving in the right direction? So if you had to say, like, man, when I see this or I see that, I know we're moving in the right direction, and that'll be kind of the first part of the question. And then the other thing is maybe that's just the first moves, and what do you want it to look like? What would you hope to happen? And I ain't talking about the nation. Let's keep it real, like our communities, because we can barely do what we're doing now to get our community right, which we got a lot of work to do. And I'm committed to try to figure that out. And the nation, I hope, will follow and take suit. But, like, what do you guys want to see in this community? And what does that look like when you go, man, we're making some progress?
I would say, just reflecting on yesterday, I had an opportunity to take part in a little peaceful protest of KTBS and one of their persons that does stories or whatever. It was kind of about the way that a story was captured of what took place downtown on Saturday. And the African American community, we were upset because it was only one picture. The pictures that were there were only of the African Americans that had their guns, practicing the Second Amendment.
Right.
As opposed to the fact that there were also white people there that had guns as well. And so our community was kind of upset because we felt like both communities was not represented at exercising their Second Amendment right.
Right.
So what I kind of discovered on yesterday is that we got a lot of work to do. I think what I would like to see come from this, the first thing I want to say is I think this situation all of this stems from the George Floyd situation. And before then, I cannot recall a time that I've lived in where we have been just brutally honest about racism.
That's right.
And I cannot remember a time since I've been living where I've seen whites and blacks sit down like we are and actually just talk about it.
Yeah.
And what I would like to see is both sides walk away from the conversation with growth.
Yeah.
And understanding about one another. That simply means that if I came into the George Floyd situation thinking that all white people were evil, then I would like to see those of us that might have felt that way have a change of heart and recognize all white people aren't evil, all white people aren't racist. Vice versa, though. I would like, if there were any white people that looked at black people pre-George Floyd and said, I'm afraid of black people, or they may hurt me, I'm not sure, I have a certain sense of uncertainty. When I get around black people, I feel a certain way. I would like to see those white people have a change of heart as well. Yeah. And an open mind about us, and recognize all of us are not looking to harm you.
Yeah.
I think open-mindedness and growth from both sides. That's when I know that the work is being done. Yeah. If we leave out of this, and the white person still feels the way about black people that they felt before this, and the black person, vice versa, still feels the way they did about white people before we went into this, then there was no growth. Yeah. So I would like to see growth on both sides, open-mindedness and acceptance on both sides. Yeah. Both of us recognizing that this is humanity staring in your face.
That's good, man.
No color of the skin. This is humanity staring in your face.
That's good. That's good, Brian. Brandon?
And I agree with what he said 100%. Much of what I would have said is tied into what he said. So I'll go into the piece that I believe would be a byproduct of that would let me know that, there's some progress, and that is when we begin to see equity. And what I mean by that is when we really begin to see things happening in every sector, education, jobs, workforce development, all the areas that we currently see inequality in, when we really begin to see equity in those areas, and without it being looked at as a handout, that's when I can say that we're finally getting it. Because, right now, anytime something is done to address the situation, it's often looked at as a handout. Well, why are we giving handouts? Why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? When it has to be understood that when you're dealing with disadvantaged people, which we are as African Americans, anytime you're trying to correct the disadvantage, there has to be unfair treatment. And what I mean by unfair treatment is somebody is going to have to get more than the other in order to rectify the level of the playing field. Yeah. The playing field is not equal. The playing field hasn't been equal since 1619. And in order to make that playing field equal, there has to be some things done that create equity, that gives opportunities that will rob. And that goes back to the honesty piece that he talked about. We have to be honest and say there was an injustice done in this country with people of color that continues to this day. That's not a excuse. That's the reality. And it's a very difficult injustice that it makes it very, very difficult for us to get on equal ground. Yeah. And so when things begin to happen that addresses that honesty, accepts that reality, and then becomes not just words, because anybody can get up and say, okay, well, I'm sorry that y'all have gone through that. I apologize. We were wrong. Okay, thank you for that. But now what? What are we going to do to put things in place to make up for it? And so when I began seeing that, I think that's when I could say, okay, we finally got it.
Yeah, okay, so let's talk through that. So this is a good point, because I think most people can kind of grab a hold of what you're saying. Some of them probably tripping right now because they're going, well, come on. Right. But keeping it real, let's go to an education situation. So if we're trying to make it equal in education, what does that look like for you? And because the white person, I'm assuming, Scott, you can step in and say anything if something comes to your mind, or if you feel they're probably going, they don't see it because it really hasn't happened to them. So only reason I have a little bit of input in this is I grew up at Warner Park. Yeah. That's where I went to elementary school. I went to Oak Terrace. Okay, Yeah. It's like,
I wouldn't have guessed that one.
yeah, I did. I went to Oak Terrace. So why I say that is, well, and I can give you, and our people know this, but I'll give you a little background on that. So my parents grew up on Randolph Street, so we went to Werner Park. Mm-hmm. My dad worked at AT&T, so he got a job working at the phone. It was Western Electric back then, all right? But he finally got some kind of a promotion. I don't know what. And he was able to say, hey, we need to move closer to the work, not out of that neighborhood. He just wanted to be closer. He didn't have to drive as far. Mm-hmm. So we moved to Southern Hills. Well, there was a difference. That's what everybody acts like, well, nah. And you're going, well, yeah, but your dad, but my dad, more than likely, based on the time, so this was 70s, and everybody, but keep it real, we had the civil rights movement in the 60s, so this ain't but 10 years different.
Correct.
He probably got a promotion over somebody else. I'm not saying that. I don't know that. But it wasn't an equal playing field even when it came to those environments. Mm-hmm. So the only reason I can relate is I'm going, well, I benefited, I was a benefactor from that. Right. I was able to go, hey, man, I didn't have anything. I'm a kid. So this is where I always get frustrated too with everybody's like, kids don't have no say in this.
Right.
If you know, like the parents are trying to figure that out. But then that allowed us to move to, and I say this, and I've told this to our church, and my kids think I'm tripping. When we moved to South Shreveport, I had never seen carpet in the house. I had never seen an air conditioner in my life. I had never seen a shower. All we ever had was a bathtub. So I remember getting on the floor and doing a carpet angel. And my mom was like, boy, what are you doing? I was like,
Right.
I ain't never seen it.
Right.
I remember standing in the shower and saying, what is that? And my mom was like, watch this. Now, my mom cleaned houses for a living. So my dad worked at AT&T, Western Electric. My mom, she was a maid. So I worked with her and the maid to clean houses. So we were in all kind of apartments, cleaning apartments and homes and everything else. But I only say that to say they were working hard to try to get us to have more stuff, because that's the American dream. We wanted a nicer house or nicer clothes. We had them old ghetto jeans on that I was trying to sew the right logo on because I wanted to be the cool kid too. And my mom was going to get credit cards to try to figure out how to do whatever. And everybody's going, well, yeah, but that was my experience. But they did have opportunity, and mainly because of my dad, it changed that. So I went to a different school. So then went to Summer Grove, from Werner Park to Summer Grove. Well, it was not black. The majority of Summer Grove kids were white, because that was what had happened when we moved out of that. So that changed a lot of different things, opportunities. I looked at my baseball team the other day. I thought about this. From my Werner Park early, it was, obviously we had blacks and whites. But when I got to Summer Grove, my baseball team was all white. You know, and I'm going, well, wait a second. Well, a kid, I didn't make those choices. I didn't know any different, but that was what was happening. That's why I'm saying now to this generation, they're going, yeah, but like, no. When you say you want it to be equal, or you want it to try to get equal, in today's world, how or what do we do to do that? Because some would say, well, they got an opportunity, they can move up. I'm like, if they don't get the job.
Yeah, because in answering that question, equal begins with, as you mentioned, making sure that everybody has those same opportunities. Now, in order to answer that question, you can't begin in 2020. You got to go all the way back and view the systemic and ingrained issues that are ingrained in society from the moment that, slavery began to take shape. So let's not even go all the way back to slavery in 1619. Let's just start at 1865, when we can say that slavery was made illegal. I never use the term when slavery ended, because it never ended. That's a thing that a lot of people don't realize. It never ended. It just became slavery under another name or in a different form. If you examine if you examine the 13th Amendment, and you find the clause that literally gave birth to mass incarceration, because 13th Amendment says that you cannot hold a slave, and I'm paraphrasing it, but a person cannot be held as a slave except for the punishment of a crime. So once they put that clause in there, well, then that gave the loophole to say, well, if we can make them prisoners, we can still get slave labor out of them. So that led to mass incarceration. When you begin at that point, and you begin even at slavery being made illegal, there was no transition period from slavery to freedom for African Americans. There was no process of, moving from point A to point B to allow us to begin living productive lives as free people. We were just released and having to figure it out on our own. Okay, now what do we do? As a matter of fact, that was so difficult that a lot of people just opted to remain with their, slave masters because freedom was just too much pressure to acquiesce to.
Well, there was no, and to just back that up, because this is, I think, to reiterate that, imagine that being today, how difficult that would be.
Right.
So forget 1800. I mean, that would be difficult for any of us today to go, okay, now, man, you're free. Well, where do I get a job?
Well,
how do I take care of my family? If nobody, especially with everything was the way it was. So I get it, but I don't think a lot of people want to get it. I don't think they want to think that. They go, man, you're going too far back. What about today? But that affects it.
Yeah. And see, that's the thing that people miss, and I don't want to dominate the conversation. You jump in whenever. That's the thing that people miss is that, no, that didn't happen today, but because the effects of it were never truly addressed, it affects today.
Oh, yeah.
Anything that takes place that is not addressed is going to continue to birth residual issues until you finally address it. So those issues never were addressed. If you want to give it a 2020 outlook and say, okay, well, help me understand that in 2020. Imagine a woman who's been married for 20, 30 years to an abusive husband who dominated, paid all the bills, made all the money, and then all of a sudden he wakes up one day and say, you know what, I want a divorce. I've already called the lawyer, the papers have already been formulated, the accounts have already been closed, because that actually happens. There's a lot of women who are watching this can tell you that those are real stories. And now a woman who has been under the provision and protection of this man for 20, 30, 40 years. Because that's oppression.
Well, because that example is, I'm saying, because he provided, but he oppressed.
He oppressed the whole time. He subjugated.
Abusive, Ray, I'm saying, because it was abusive and all that.
Yeah, abusive. Subjugated that woman all her life. And now she wakes up and has to figure out how she's going to take care of herself just like that. No resources. Nobody's giving her anything. Nobody's watching after her because the person that was doing all that has just ran off. Now imagine that happening after 300 years. And now you got to figure out how you're going to transition. Mm-hmm. So when you look at that and you look at not only were there no measures taken to transition us into freedom, but laws were continued, Jim Crowism were continued to be enforced to make it difficult to make that transition. Yeah. So because of that, make a long story short, because of these different laws and legislations, which many of them are still in place today, when you say to us, everybody has an opportunity, work hard, pull yourself up from your bootstraps, we don't even have boots. When you say pull yourself up from the bootstrap, we still trying to figure out how to get boots because certain laws have made it difficult for us to even have boots. So we got to fight to get the boots for us to pull ourselves up by the bootstraps. And last statement that I make to just kind of give you an example of what I mean, even when you go to education, because employment was so difficult for us to obtain, because home ownership was so difficult for us to obtain, because of redlining measures where it was intentionally enforced to create lower income neighborhoods that we call ghettos. These were intentional. You can do the research on that. And because many schools and many school districts are funded by tax property or property tax. Well, in lower income neighborhoods, the property taxes are, of course, lower because property values are lower. So if it's based on property tax, of course, you have more affluent neighborhoods that have the opportunity to get more income from those property tax. And then you have the families in those communities who, because they've been given the opportunity to get the better jobs, to get the promotion, and to get the education, they make more money, so they're able to give more through PTA, things of that nature. Where in African American communities, we really don't have a lot of leftover money to give to a PTA because we're barely making enough money to pay rent and bills and things of that nature. So those are some of the examples of what we mean by the intentional injustices, that once those things begin to get rectified and addressed, then I can say, yeah, we're making some progress.
So I'm going to say one thing, Brian, before he adds in on this, because one thing you said in like one of our, I don't remember what conversation we were in, but that still stuck with me, and I've said it to many white people since then, and it was about naming your children.
Yeah.
And now this is going to be for white people a trip, because tell them what you told me or us whenever we were all talking about this, because this is a big deal. Brian, you may not have heard him say this, but for white people, this trips us out.
My children are named Brandon, Brianna, and Braylon. My wife and I intentionally gave them names that if you read them on a resume or an application, you have a difficult time determining whether they're white or black. Because a lot of employers, if they know the name gives an indication that this person is black, they automatically reject it. And this is a proven fact. I've talked to employers who've done it. I've talked to people who work for employers that have done it. And it goes right in with redlining and how they impacted the mortgage industry, and it even goes into the education industry and how they approve and accept college students. If they see a name that looks white, but the ethnicity is not identified, then they assume is white. That's one of the reasons that a lot of job applications and a lot of employers started using that ethnicity box. And a lot of people don't know that. They started using that ethnicity box because they want to know before they even read your resume or call you whether or not you're black, white, or non-Latino. But once upon a time, if they're reading the resume, because of course on the resume you don't have to tell them that you're black. Right. So my wife and I intentionally made sure that we named them names that makes it difficult to read their resume and tell what ethnicity they are.
Now, the only reason I say that, because I talked to some young white couples, and they had their babies and stuff. So I said, that's something you've never had to think about. Never even crossed their mind.
Yeah.
And that's what I told them. I said, that's why me talking to Brandon or talking to Brian helps me understand. It just gives me a different perspective, because that's something I never thought about.
That's common in our community.
Yeah.
And not only that, but that's what we were taught at Grambling as part of filling out our resumes and applying at different companies, Fortune 500 companies, or the different companies that came. IBM would come, all types of companies would come and recruit. And they would tell us, our teachers would tell us, to make sure, hopefully you don't have a name that will give away your ethnicity, because if you do, it's going to be hard for you, because they know who you are coming in the door. So we've been taught that. I name my kids for the same reason.
Really, Brian?
Yeah, that's common. Yeah. That's common conversation in the black home.
See, and the reason I say that is that's what they got to hear.
Yeah.
When I say they, I'm talking about us. So we gotta understand. And I'm 50 years old. I've never heard that before.
Yeah. That
so I was like, man, I appreciate y'all sharing it, because then it's like that lets you know. It kind of gives you an insight to go that you haven't thought of that before. Now let me go back to y'all, because both of y'all went to college. You worked hard. How did you get to college? Did you get through scholarships? You get through your mama? Did you get through jobs? Because you had to work through it. So I want people to understand what that journey was like, because we're talking about, just at this particular time, education. Because I'm trying to figure out for my daughter, okay? So I'm going, we don't have a lot of money either. So we're trying to go apply. But she may or may not, I'm trying to figure out, have more opportunities. And according from your perspective, she would definitely have more opportunities, which is probably true. But I want them to hear from your side what that was like.
Well, I would say, just listen to Brandon. First of all, for any person that looks at black people and say, well, listen, they're looking for handouts, or they're complaining about something that they don't have a legitimate reason, because here's what I've experienced. I've experienced sometimes when I get in the white context is that the white people will point at me and use me as a reason why black people shouldn't be complaining about for equity. So they say, well, you got an education, you got a college education, so why couldn't your neighbor do it? And I always tell them, like, you listen, man, it's by the grace of God. This has nothing to do with me or my intelligence. It's all by the grace. Let me just, if I could just walk you through my own story of my when I was 4 years old, my mother put me in kindergarten. So I started the kindergarten program. That's because my birthday was kind of coming at a point where I was going to turn 5 during the year, so she went ahead and started me at 4. She put me in this predominantly white school. It was a magnet school where you had to get tested to even start the program. She put me there because my brother was already there. And since he was already there, he was excelling. She just figured, hey, 2 kids at the same school, it doesn't make sense to send them to 2 different schools. Even though we 2 different children, 2 different personalities, it just made sense to send both kids to one school. So she sent me there, and I tested in, and I don't know what I scored on the test, but whatever it was, during that particular time, they had this system at this predominantly white school that if you scored a certain level below whatever their benchmark was, then they would put you in basically these classes that was like a step under special ed. So if you were in these classes, you were on your way to special ed. This was like the class before the special ed class, all right? So they put me in this class. They call it the speech class. So what they would do in this class is they took you out of your regular class, maybe like, I don't know, so many times a week, and they would take you to this class. And this class maybe had 5 kids. But all of the kids understood that when this teacher assistant comes to get you, then you're going into the stupid people class with the kids. I mean, you know, with kids that are slow. So I was seen as this slow kid at this school, right? And things went, I didn't do well my first year in kindergarten. So they actually called my mother, who was an educator in the Caddo Parish school system at the time, and they said, you know, your son is having some learning disabilities, as we assumed he did, and so he's going to have to repeat kindergarten again. I did kindergarten again at the same school. This time it didn't work out too well. The second time they called my mom, they say, listen, your son now has to go to special ed. He's failed speech twice. He must go to special ed now, right? My mom was like, nah, that ain't gonna happen. Because she raised me, she knew that there was nothing wrong. And my dad told me a story. He was like, man, when you were 2 years old, you used to sit next to me and just have adult conversations with me. And he was like, I used to be like bewildered, like this is weird. Like this 2-year-old is talking to me and articulating itself. And so he said, we were struggling with how can they say you're not articulate? And I've been watching you when me and your mother were married. I saw you sit there and just talk to me like you were an adult. And so my mom said, no, he's not going to special ed. So she pulled me out of that school after the second try and failed kindergarten. Pulled me out of that school. She took me to a predominantly black school, Lakeshore Elementary. I went to first grade. Lakeshore went ahead and promoted me to first grade, even though I almost said the school, even though the white magnet school in Shreveport.
You'd have been cool with it. We'd have been all right with it.
South Highlands. I just go ahead and put them out there.
Yeah, put them out there.
So since I didn't do well at South Highlands, she took me to Lakeshore. Lakeshore promoted me. South Highlands wanted to keep me and put me in special ed. I don't even think they had a special ed program at the school. So I went to Lakeshore. My first grade year, I made straight A's. Second grade, straight A's. Third grade, straight A's. Fourth grade, straight A's. Fifth grade, straight A's. Graduated at the top of elementary school.
So now you bragging.
So check this out. No, I just want to show you
I'm picking with you
about the injustice.
I didn't have that.
About the injustice that you don't see.
Sure.
They may not call you out of your name, but it's if you don't test well, if you don't have a certain test score, then you are ultimately categorized as a low performing student. But I go to a predominantly black school, and somehow I go from dumb to Einstein. Wow. I don't think that's like, I don't think I just woke up one day and was just Einstein.
And let me plug this in, and
I love Brandon.
just real quick.
Keeping it real, bro.
Yeah.
The exact same thing happened to my oldest son. Exact same thing.
Yeah.
I just want to plug
that
in there. So this ain't just you.
Continue on. So
went to Cattle Middle Magnet for middle school, straight A's. Went to Huntington for high school, straight A's. Went to Grambling for college, straight A's. Went to Morehouse for my master's degree, straight A's. But somehow at South Highlands, I was eligible for special ed.
Wow.
I'm just saying, to this day, I used to carry what they told me about myself with me as my testimony. So I would talk to black kids and I would say, listen, when I was 4 and 5 years old, I was told this about myself, but look at what God did. And just last week, after having this conversation with y'all and Laura, and she emailed me talking about the conversation, and I was reflecting on the conversation we had. And I emailed her and I started sharing the story, and I said, I'm starting to discover that I need to eliminate that as a part of my story, because that's what somebody told me, but that's not who I was. And so she said, she told me this, these are her words. She said, I want to tell that 4-year-old Brian that you are good enough. That's and when good. She told me that, man, I had tears in my eyes at 38, because it took me 34 years to get over what I had encountered at South Howlands.
That's big, man.
34 years. So when we talking about racism, it's not always somebody calling you the N-word. Sometimes it's you being treated differently in a classroom because of your skin color. And the teacher doesn't have to say anything, but you feel it.
That's big.
Because the teacher doesn't call on you for anything. The teacher puts you in the back of the class. The teacher goes to the administrators and say, this kid can't do it. But then I go to Lakeshore, and all of a sudden I'm up here. And it wasn't because the kids at Lakeshore weren't smart. I truly believe it was the educators that were in the classroom. The ones at Lakeshore, they were all black. The ones at South Highlands, they were all white. I was probably one of the only black children in that classroom for those first 2 years of kindergarten. Terrible experience, man.
Yeah.
Terrible experience. I'm simply saying this, that as whites and blacks, if we trying to get over this, man, it's a hard thing.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, you got to get to the place where you don't see black kids or white kids differently. Period. Regardless of what you see on the news.
Yes.
Regardless of how much you see that we may have, we got a lot of violence in our community. I acknowledge that. I also acknowledge that some of these things that have happened in our history has kind of unfortunately aided in that process. Man, we got a lot of angry black people, man, that we don't even fully understand our anger.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? All we know is we were birthed in it. All we know is we got in the classroom and we were treated differently. That's what we know.
Yeah.
And that's the reason, if we want to go historically, why we had historically black institutions as opposed to predominantly white institutions.
We had to have them.
We had to have them.
And
historically, we had to have them. Black people were seen as not good enough to even be in the classroom or even receive an education.
And how I can to reinforce you and encourage you in the fact that I really appreciate you sharing the story, because I think when y'all share your stories, it helps the white community understand. But I can understand when I realize, and anybody listening, you hear me when I say this, white person, my friends, when my grandparents would demean a person because of the color of their skin, I know that's a fact. And you know it's a fact. So don't deny that.
Right.
So don't try to act like you don't. So my mom taught me, we ain't gonna do that. Right. Somebody had to say, that's jacked up. That ain't the way this is gonna go. Now that's only some people feel like we get some award because we don't do that. That ain't nothing. That's just basic human rights to treat somebody and not say something negative about them. But then I always say, as a believer, what really ticks me off is on the Christian side of things, when we're still trying to argue against your pain. That don't make sense to me.
Right.
So when I go to Africa, I'll give you a great example. We take people to Africa, and we plan on going back, and I told you, Brandon, I've told Pastor, I want you to go to your homeland. I want you to see what's going on, and I want you to see how much they're accomplishing and how much they've overcome, even in the genocide of their own people in Rwanda. That's specifically where we go. And our white people, or whoever that may go with, are like, oh my God. I'm like, the way that you're admiring this country and these people, take that home to Bossier, take that home to Shreveport, because that's, to me, is what the problem is like, as a Christian, we don't really want to look at ourselves. We don't really want to talk about that. And that's why I'm thankful for you saying it, because I know I still got work to do. There's still moments that when someone, regardless of how they do it, I go, all right, Lord, help me. Because, man, my grandparents were this way. My parents were changing, and now I'm raising my kids, and so we do have a chance. My hope and prayer is that your kids and my kids and then your great-grand begin to change it, because we are having these conversations that a lot of people didn't have.
And let me interject this. Well, I do want to say that from that experience, I never went to a white school ever again. Mm-hmm. Like, I had it made up in my mind, I'm not going to a white school again.
Yeah, sure.
The Calumet Magnet was forced on me. My mama was like, listen.
And you got to do what mama says.
It's either middle magnet or she's trying to get me in some like private church school. And I was like, I ain't going to no private church school. So just send me to middle magnet. But I'll let you know, it was in Cedar Grove, and there was a whole lot of black folk at middle magnet. I don't care what nobody say. It was a lot of black folk. It was a lot of fights. It was a lot of everything. But I purposely chose to go to black institutions from that point forward, simply because of the experience I had at South Highlands. My brother has a totally different story, man, because he succeeded in that realm. Yeah, I didn't. And I'm just simply saying, you can't treat all black people the same in that situation. You know, no, that's when white people try to use me as an example of success and say, well, hey, why didn't your homeboy, why didn't he? Man, listen, don't use me. I'm like, don't use, because my homeboy had a totally different situation. But I even want to go further. If we want to talk about just the black experience, man, listen, I cannot tell you, I can only go as far back in the black side of my family. I can only go as far back to my great-great-grandmother. I can't trace it any further, because we can't go back to Africa to find out how Isabella, which is my great-great-grandmother, my great-great-great-grandmother. Yeah. No, my great-great-grandmother. Mm-hmm. So my great-great-grandmother, Isabella, was a slave. She was bought by my great-great-grandfather, Ben May. All right? He bought like 30 slaves. Isabella was one of them. Isabella and her mom ended up being a part of that group that he bought of slaves. They moved to Grambling, which was Jackson Parish at the time, Lincoln Parish. All right. And he had 17 children, and one of them is my great grandfather, Philip May. And the only reason I knew there was white in my family is because my mom used to have a picture of Philip, which is her grandfather, and my great grandmother, which is her grandmother. And my great grandmother is like just dark skinned. Mm-hmm. Then Uncle Phil, Papa Phil, which is my great grandfather, in the picture he looks like you. And so when I was young, I say, Mama, that's a white man. And she's like, boy, shut up. Don't ask me about the picture. He ain't white. I was like, Mama, that's a white man. No, he ain't white. He ain't white. He ain't white. So when I got old, I was like, yo, y'all just tell me the truth. What's going on in this family? You know what I'm saying? Like, what's up? Because this is a white man on this picture. Yeah. And they was like, okay, so here it is. Actually, his father was a slave owner. It's Ben. He purchased your great-grandmother, your great-great-grandmother, which was Isabella. He died at some point, Ben, while the slaves were still on his land. But he had 17 children by your great-great-grandmother while she was his slave. And so when he died, it was just them. And Isabella was left to raise the rest of the children all by herself and take care of her mother at the same time. And from that point, they had nobody to like pick up the reins. So some of the some of the sons from that marriage had to produce, had to figure out a way. I'm simply saying this, is that being the slave purchaser, which is my great-great-grandfather, which is a white man, pure white man, European, okay? He purchases them, he dies, brings them to Jackson Parish, he dies, and they're on their own on this plantation. They ain't got nothing but a bunch of grass and this house. And from that point, they got to figure out something.
Got to figure it out.
So how did they make it? By the grace of God. Yeah. Because some of those kids decided they were old enough to work or old enough to do this, or they taught themselves to read because they couldn't read, or they became businessmen somehow, some way in the community, and that's how things began. But I'm simply saying that's my great grand. That's 3 generations, man.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's I'm not far removed from that. I was living when my great grandfather, the guy that looked white, I got a picture with him holding me. That's how.
See,
we're not that far removed.
Not that, and I say that all the time.
Yeah,
people.
And so I say that to say is Brandon, when I go look at my family tree and I'm trying to figure out where everything started, we got a Facebook page, and we actually found some descendants of being pure white European. They're part of our Facebook page in our family. So you got black people and pure white people in one Facebook family group, because they are descendants of being before he purchased Isabella, because he was married 3 times to 3 white women before that even took place. Wow. So he had children all over the place, and we reconnecting. But here's the problem. I can't find where Isabella's life starts. And I can't find who I know who her mother was, but I don't know who her mother was.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So the only family I can really trace is the white side.
Yeah.
I cannot trace the black side because we can only stop in America. We can't go all the way back to Africa because America doesn't have African records.
Yeah.
You feel what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah. No, I get it.
So I can go all the way back with Ben, but I can only stop at the 3rd generation with Isabel.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
Oh, yeah.
That's a problem. So I got white cousins, and I told my wife this. I said, this is really uncomfortable for me to be in this situation, and probably should be for a lot of black people, because we actually got this white connection that we don't even know we have, where the white slave owner purchased our grandmothers or our great grandmothers and birthed our mothers and grandmothers from that particular whatever that was.
Right.
I can't call it a union because they couldn't get married. I don't know if she agreed with the situation or not. All I know is on the records, it shows her as a slave.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. See, but that's what, to me, this is what makes it fascinating. And I'm so thankful, because you got to hear it. You got to walk through your experiences. You got to walk through what you're going through, your feelings. And typically, I think, Brian, you said it in one of the meetings we were in. You're like, man, I don't have no white friends.
Right. I don't even have no white friends.
And I was like, man, we got to fix that, because I'm better when you're in my life. Right. And I hope that it eventually will make you better.
Absolutely.
But that's, to me, is where it starts to be compassionate or understanding or empathetic, to be able to go, man, because that was one of the questions that brought up yesterday in the Zoom call is, empathy. And I was just saying that the only way you're going to get to be empathetic is when you can talk with honesty and feel free to talk without being judged or attacked. So I'm telling you, dude, thank you for saying it, because talking it out and working it out helps all of us.
And I want to thank you and Laura and this lady named Sister Kane. I'm going to make sure she look at this. She's a white lady that joined Galilee, man, maybe about a few months ago. And she said, I know I'm going to challenge this congregation because I'm white and my husband is white. But let me tell you, the fact that you 3, I have told my story to you 3, and each one of you all have been so empathetic and spoke words of affirmation back into my life. You didn't get offended. Each one of you that I've shared this story with spoke back into my life, and basically overshadowed all of the negative words that I might have been fed as a black kid. And you spoke and you said, you know what? You are worth something. In some way,
right. And
you
absolutely.
all have spoken that into me. And man, it does so much. And I'm starting to, wow, I didn't know. But how much better of a world and how much complete of children we could have.
Oh, yeah, man.
Brings
tears in my eyes, man, because I just
start speaking
that's what's
words
gotta
of
happen,
affirmation into each other's life, man.
And that's what's got to happen.
That's that's exactly what I was about to say. That's what has to happen on a grander scale, is for us to have more people, rather than responding with a but what about this, or when we talk about slavery, you want to bring up Irish slavery in England, or when we talk about our injustices, you want to bring up
black on black crime,
or whatever.
That's
you've
a
been
common
through.
response.
Oh yeah.
And just as it is with any argument or any conversation, you just want the person that you're talking to at least acknowledge your pain. And we had this conversation the first time we talked, and I always bring it back to marriage, because for me, marriage is God's ultimate example of relationship, human to human. When God created the marriage, he gave us the ultimate example of what he wants human to human relationship look like. And I always bring it back to me and my wife. You know, and women can understand this a whole lot quicker than men usually can. But when a woman is sharing her pain or sharing her hurt with her husband, sometimes she is not even expecting him to do anything. Sometimes she just want to know that there is somebody who acknowledges the fact that she has a reason to be upset, or that she has a reason to be hurt. I'm not telling you to go fix the world. I'm having this conversation with you to hear you say, baby, I understand. And even if I don't agree, I understand that what I did hurt you.
Yeah.
You know, now there's been times where and I had to learn this in our marriage. There's been times where we had arguments or disagreements, and I'm constantly trying to prove myself right. You know, I'm constantly trying to prove, well, no, I didn't say that. That ain't what I said. Yeah, but that's what I heard. That's what she'll tell me. I'll come back and say, I didn't say that. I ain't mean that. Yeah, but that's how I interpreted it. And because I interpreted it like that, obviously there's a backstory to why my mind processes what happened that way. Then you begin to understand her past. And you begin to understand what she went through as a child. Because what we go through as children shapes our perception. It shapes how we see the world. What your children are going through, what our children are going through right now, and how we raise them is going to shape how they see the world. And so when something happens to them, they're always going to view what happened to them through the lens of how we raised them. And what, just like you just said, you did not even touch a PWI again because of what happened at South Highlands when you were in kindergarten. It shaped how you saw the world. And when we're having conversations with people about how we were raised and how we grew up, and that dates all the way back through slavery, you have to understand. We just want you to understand that no matter how much you argue, no matter how much you try to compare and contrast trauma, because once you get into a place where you comparing and comparing trauma, you never end that argument. We're not trying to compare and contrast trauma. We're not comparing ourselves to what the Native Americans went through. We're not comparing ourselves to what Jewish people went through. We're taking our reality and trying to get you to understand that this is why we see the world the way we see the world. You want to talk about black on black crime? Let me tell you one of the reasons why there is black on black crime. Because people are fighting for survival in these communities. They've been robbed from so many opportunities that they take it upon themselves to say, you know what, I'm going to eat one way or another. And if that means me robbing somebody, if that means me stealing it because the opportunities are not going to come, there's been so many laws made against me to where I have to figure something out. This is what's going to happen. So when just like he had this conversation with you, and just like he had shared that information with Laura, and they responded not with a comparison of their own upbringing, but responding by simply saying, I understand how that hurt you. And let me give you a word of affirmation. Man, he just sat there and said that did so much for him. And take that and put it on a grander scale with African Americans, and consider the fact that a lot of times that's what we want. That's what we need.
Let me tell you how much that did for me, man. That I've been in a habit of discounting myself for so long that I literally have to remind myself of the words Laura gives me every day, because my thought process has been so wired to say, Brian, you're not good enough. So don't even say nothing. Don't even step up. Don't even go to the podcast thing today, because your voice really don't matter. And then I had to remind myself today She told me I was good enough.
And you are good enough,
So I'm
man.
showing up today. And that's real talk.
And you
man.
showed up, boy.
Yeah.
Showed up.
Straight up.
Serious.
Straight up.
But this is why it matters, man. And this is why I say that, dude. Both of you, that you're willing to come in to an unfamiliar, all-white place, it appears. Now, we got some brothers in there, and I'm very thankful for my friends. But y'all don't know that. And I consider y'all friends. That's why I said when I said it on the Zoom yesterday. To me, it's about friendship. Because if I love you and I carry you for you as my friend, that takes time. There ain't no way that's going to happen in one podcast or one meal.
Right.
But it starts in the one podcast and the one meal and the one Zoom. And then 10 years from now, you're better. And I told people this. I'm better for every black man that has been in my life. That's a fact. Because they help me see things differently. Whether that's Daryl, whether that's Wendell. I could go through and go. All those relationships impacted me in a positive way. I want to be able to say the same thing as we continue for my kids and for us as friends. And I'm thankful for Laura instigating these meetings and the Zoom calls because we got to figure it out.
Got to figure it out.
Yeah.
And this is a part of it.
Yes,
and I want you to be able to be confident in your story and what God's done with you. And the same with Brandon. I want us to be able to go, man, I know God's doing something. I know God's going to continue to do something. And you're the generation, and I've said this to other people talking about the COVID thing. So I have pastors around the country that'll call or talk that I have friends with, and they're going, man, can you believe we going through this? Like, the whole church is jacked up. It's stuff. Everybody's scattered out. And I said, but think about this, dude. That God thought about who he would put in this generation that was big enough, strong enough, creative enough to go, that's who's going to be this generation. You could have been in any generation.
Yeah, that's yeah.
But
that's
and I'm gonna go that way with the race thing. Martin Luther King was in his generation because that had to happen. He knew who the leader was to put in that position to get what was to get done. He knows who needs to be in this generation.
Yeah.
God's sovereign, man. He knew exactly, man. It is you, Brian. It is you, Brandon. It is you, Justin. Because if nobody else, who is going to do it? Well, I know who will do it. And then he knows the kids that we're having. He's like, dude, I'm putting something on those kids. Because we know what's been on. We know what's happening. But this world needs hope. The black community, the white community, this nation, this world. So that you're here, it gives me hope. I know it gives our listeners hope. It challenges them to think differently. And I'm very, very grateful for the sacrifice of time and the hearts to be able to share what's going on. And this ain't the last one. Because we already, how long are we? I bet we went long, didn't we?
We're an hour and 17, and I have a question that I want to ask.
Okay. All right. But that's one of the longest ones ever. But the reason why it's so good, man, is we don't get to hear it.
Right.
We don't get to talk about it.
Right.
They stay in white groups talking about it, and blacks stay in black groups talking about it, and we don't come together to go, man, let me hear what's up. So, all right, Scott, and then we got to go eat, brother.
I'm hungry. I'm hungry. Well, you know I'm hungry. I'm a big boy.
Hey, we're going to eat. But
And I don't know why I'm talking so loud.
That's all right.
Like the typical
Anyway.
board operator.
Yeah,
He's like,
That sound like I'm on NPR. Next up. No,
dude, it's crazy.
You
But no-
stupid, man.
But no, my question is, because this is just my own white self, is what has made the George Floyd incident so different than from other ones? Like with Rodney King and with everything else.
Yeah.
Like, to me, because I was alive during Rodney King and I remember all that. And there's been countless others that have happened. But what is it about this particular incident that's so different? Because now I feel like, and for the first time, at least that I can remember, these conversations are happening, not just here, but nationwide. So why was this so different this time?
It goes back to what he just said, the timing of it and God's sovereignty in it. When you bring up the issues of Rodney King, okay, that was in the 90s. I mean, there was a lot of distraction that was available that could take you away from it, allow you to ignore the reality of it. Same thing with a lot of the issues that we face recently, because we can go down a who's list of names of individuals that were George Floyd's. Of course, if you remember, it wasn't too long ago where Eric Garner uttered those same words when he was being arrested. I can't breathe. So what's the difference between Eric Garner and George Floyd? We can't ignore this one. It happened during COVID-19, where all we could do was watch TV and watch the internet. It's on every channel. It was on every social media site. We couldn't run from it. We couldn't work our way through it because everybody's at home. It forced us. People talk about, why because I've heard several people say this. Why is George Floyd the hero? It's not that we pinpointed him as the hero. Is that God orchestrated this situation to such a degree to where it happened at a time that it couldn't be ignored. We had to face this one. The level of distraction that was once upon a time present, it's not here in 2020. Mm-hmm. We're all at home watching TV. We're all at home watching social media. And you add to that the level of racial tension that already existed in the country at that time for several reasons. That was the climax.
Yep.
And that's the way I answer that question. When you add the level of tension that was already there leading up to that, and you add the fact that there was no way to run from it, and you add to the fact that it was so egregious. This was not an accident. We sat there and watched this man's knee on his neck for 8 minutes. That's not accidental. That's not a slip of the wrist. He's staring back in the camera, looking into the camera with his knee on his neck while this man is saying he can't breathe, with another guy standing right there playing security guard. It was too egregious to ignore.
I agree with him on that. Is the first one I think is less distractions, like he said, and that's why I think we need to really consider if we want to restart. I'm a sports fan. But I heard a couple of athletes say, if we start basketball now, this is some NBA players, then what we're going to do is take away from the movement because we just giving people a distraction away from the reality that's going on, right? So what you're going to hear now is what happened on the basketball game the night before. Now that the league has come back, and you're not going to hear as much coverage. See, media has a lot to do with how we perceive a lot of stuff, right? And we really seeing that today, right? COVID-19 was all over the TV because that's all we had going on, right? Mm-hmm. And it is something that we should be very concerned about. It's definitely hitting our communities, and it is scary. It's scary what it's doing to people and the death toll, but that's all we had, right? And so, man, everybody was up here with it, right? Then George Floyd takes place. First of all, that's hard to watch. That's one reason why it's hard to watch.
It's very hard to watch.
One man put his knee on the neck of another man for 8 minutes long, and 8 minutes and some seconds, and just look around at people while he doing it, and kind of just like chilling on the guy's neck. It's
tough.
And that's tough to watch. So the distractions, less distractions, and then I think again it's the build up. It's almost like, okay, enough is enough now. All right. That's enough. I don't have to go to work in it either. So when I'm waking up, I'm right back on it again. You know what I'm saying? So I think it, and I think God was in it.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say.
The timing of it, man. You can't.
All I was going to say, Scott, and to go along with them, and then we're really probably running out of time. But think about this, and because you were a kid when Rodney King happened. I wasn't. I mean, I remember that and going. The only reason we knew that is because somebody found a way to video that. So and then everybody was tripping. You couldn't watch that and go, "What is happening?" But you didn't have continuous media coverage.
Yeah, right.
You didn't have social media.
Right.
You didn't have everybody with the phone.
Right.
You didn't have any. I mean, so now you fast forward. It's been built, Ferguson. It's been, dude. It's starting, but and I agree with them. What makes George Floyd different to me is the fact he really didn't do anything.
Yeah, man.
So like I hear white people say this a lot. Well, man, yeah, but like he shouldn't have done this, and he shouldn't have done on whatever. Pick another individual, another circumstance. When you watch that, you're going, all right, now explain that one then, because that's the part that I think is so difficult to understand and watch is when you go, Because I've heard people, this is what makes me really, really frustrated from the white community. Now, again, I'm probably going there and all my people going, oh, Jesus, take the wheel, you know? No, but this does frustrate me. You want to justify a horrific act based on he had marijuana. Or, I heard people say this. Well, you know he had drugs in his system. Do you really want to go down that road?
Right.
Do you really want to? So that justifies killing him?
Right.
That justifies. And then to be a Christian, so let's take white people out of it. Let's just go back to Jesus. You can't justify. You can't make it right in your mind. You can't make this go away. And so I think that's the enemy always comes to steal, kill, and destroy, white and black, yellow, brown. But Jesus came that we'd have life and life to the fullest. So God also always turns around what the enemy means for harm, and he's always trying to find some way to go, man, I'm going to bring some good out of this. As horrible as that all is, COVID to George Floyd, God is at work in bringing some good that the enemy still, but he's still at work. The enemy's still going to try to divide. He's still going to keep trying to. So that's the hard part is I look at it and go, man, it's horrific. But Lord, is there any way to let that situation bring change about? Then we got to bring change about. So for Simple Church, we're talking about solving problems. I am working with the police department. I am trying to call out to some of my friends and go in San Antonio a different way to interact with, regardless of color, black, white, yellow, orange. It don't make no difference. And that's where everybody's willing to change. And if we're all willing to change the way we see things, the way we behave, the way we view people, then we got a chance. But when you don't think, and Brandon, I think Brian, y'all both, we said it yesterday, if you don't think there's a problem, then you ain't going to change.
Right.
But I know there's a problem. And America is waking up to, we know there's a problem. So then that's where we start going, well, what can I do? I can't change everything right, but I can, hey, man, can y'all come be on the pod? Hey, let's go eat. We can begin to do small things that will add up to big things, but not letting it go away.
Right.
Not saying, well, that was then and now let's move on. That's old news. Man, come on, bro. That's pretty tough. So anyway, I just see that as in the timing thing of what's going on with it too. Absolutely. And let's be honest. Okay, let's call us out. Would we have Brandon and Brian here to do a podcast if it hadn't happened? No.
Probably not, yeah. And that's sad.
It's just sad. That's a fact, though. Because it wasn't in my mind. Now, again, we work with people in the black community. I have friends in the black community. It wasn't that our heart was wrong. I'm going, but we weren't having this conversation.
Right.
No.
Right. No, we weren't either.
No. And that's what I'm saying. It's like, so now you go, all right, God, we got it.
It's a blessing in this, man.
Yeah.
If we stick with the path.
And we're going to.
You know, if we stick with the path, it's a blessing in this, man. And I can see it down the road if we keep this going. And I see it going. I think that it's picked up so much momentum. It's hard to see this dying.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And because it's relationships, it's hard to kill relationships, man. You know what I'm saying?
And that's what it comes down to.
Time doesn't even kill relationships.
Nope.
Me and this dude ain't seen each other and worked together in years, but relationships
goes a long way.
Listen, man.
And that's
we
why I'm
started
saying,
this thing together, bro.
And that's why I'm saying we got to have black-white relationships.
Yeah, relationships, man.
You do. You got, and that starts. It's a long process.
Right.
Yeah. And I want to reiterate that it is a long process. And so to everybody who's watching, listening, do understand we're dealing with over 400 years of complications to this thing. And you don't fix, 400-year problems in 4 days and 4 months. I think Pastor Curry talked about that yesterday. Mm-hmm. We want a quick fix, but it's not going to be quick. Mm-hmm. But if we continue the path and continue to just do the small things, God told the Israelites, little by little, you'll drive the enemy out.
That's right.
And if we do this little by little, so for those who are watching, asking, okay, well, what do we do now? Little by little, something as simple as this, where we may not have changed legislation today, but we have at least presented an image of genuine relationship that creates a ground for understanding and perception. And so little by little, we will make progress, and we'll see ourselves journey into that place where we've conquered Canaan.
And if y'all can continue to help us, I'm going to let people ask questions. If y'all are willing to come back, we'll keep trying to work through our questions.
Yes.
And then you do the same for us. If there's something you want to ask, please ask, because I don't think you're in a safe place. In other words, I don't, like I said yesterday, if we feel like either of us are going to attack, it won't help us. We won't have true honesty and feeling.
Yeah.
And I don't want to, that ain't who we are, and that's not what we're about. I just want to say, as we're working through that, thank you for doing this today. Thank you for sharing your stories. But as we continue, please feel free to ask us or bring whatever you can if there's something we can help you with as well.
Man, thank you. And I got a great idea. I think one thing we can do is bring our congregations together, not gathering, but let's identify a Saturday and a community, and let's pool our resources together, and let's just give in whatever way, whether that's paying for gas for everybody.
Oh, absolutely.
But let's do it together. Let's do it. Let's the churches do it together, and we all stand out in that community together, white and black. And we do that, whether that's just giving gas, whatever it is.
Let's do that.
But publicly, I think it's time for us as black and white pastors to start doing ministry work together.
Amen.
I think that's powerful, and I think we can do more. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, we'll definitely be able to do more.
Our church by ourselves can only buy so many gas cards if that's what we were doing.
Yeah.
But if we go with Simple Church and then we go with Brandon's church together,
oh yeah, we can do more.
that goes from 100 to 300 gas cards. That's 300 people.
Right.
That's right.
As opposed to if we were doing it by myself, only one. You see what I'm
That's
saying?
good. No, it's solid.
And I have a Jeep that gets like a mile per gallon, so that'd be
See what
great.
I'm saying?
You're going to be first in line.
But something like that.
We're turning him out.
Yeah. And it ain't even traditional church because
No, I
the
like
gathering
it.
situation. But
yeah.
it's just Saturday.
Absolutely.
We outside and identify that community, that gas station, and we just there.
We can figure it out. I like it.
I like it.
All right, thanks for listening, Brandon, Brian. Y'all taking care of us. We love you,
Thank you,
dude.
man.
Yeah.
Love y'all.
All right, we got to get out. Until next time, peace, my brothers.